Okay, love bugs. I'm not quite sure what I was expecting to watch tonight. I just know it wasn't this. And the first thing I learned from looking at this episode is that as a people, we're just not ready to reopen the wounds of Ferguson and New York and all the other states that have been going through what has been happening around the country. This recap is going to be a little different because I would be remiss if I sat here and played jokes and laughed about any of this. None of this was funny. What you saw was a man who took pride in raising his son by himself, a man who did everything he could to keep his child out of harm's way, and one interaction with a police officer who was just frustrated by being in a community that he felt had no qualms about being disrespectful to him when he's out there to protect and serve, as he said, and that he leaves his family every day to go into harm's way. He had just had enough. He had snapped. And so for me, I look at an episode like this and I say, where do we do training for these police officers and have therapy for them when they're dealing with all kinds of crazy things in the community? Where do we as a people sit down and have conversations, hard conversations? We already know we have these dialogues with our children about being respectful to police officers and to stay out of harm's way and to come home alive. And then there are other people who say, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. But at the end of the day, the police officers are the ones with the guns. And so I don't even know where to go with this. And I am a mother of two boys who, when that man sat in that chair and said, I tried everything. I want to make sure he could make it to if he could just make it to 18. I said the same thing. If my sons could just make it to 18. And when they made it to 18, I said, if they could just make it through college, and one is finished college and the other one is in college, right? And so I got that piece. And I then had to look at the part where the Marcus, the activist who was so angry and with righteous indignation and riling up the people, and he had a point. But then he turned against Olivia, who he thought was just not black enough. We've got to stop doing these kinds of things, right? People may not come from the same point of view that you do, but at least you have common ground. And your common ground is you don't want any more children to die. You don't want anybody else to die needlessly. And so yeah. I can't even lie. I cried. I cried when that man got into the White House and hugged the president and knew when he got home that evening he was not going to see his son again, ever again. I cried because that boy, was taking a piece of paper out of his pocket. The cops saw belligerence. I cried because I saw frustration on both ends. I'm tired. When do we really sit down and start to say, what are we going to do? Instead of pointing fingers and telling people that their way is wrong, or, if you're not militant enough or you're not saying anything enough. People have different ways of dealing with these issues. And if this episode does nothing else for us, nothing else, it is to sit back and make us think about how we've been managing, what we have been doing, and finding common ground on either end, just to figure this thing out. Because we're in a pickle right now, and it's not going to get any better unless we sit down and talk. I'm done. Good night, lovies.